I had maintained a platonic relationship with my girlfriend for 3 years, always respecting the boundaries. Yet she stayed out all night on the eve of our wedding. That same night, her secret Weibo account posted a photo of a blood-stained white sheet. I've always saved my most precious gift for you, even if I don't belong to you. In this lifetime, my heart will forever be with you. To commemorate their love, she even cut out that bedsheet and brought it home. Yet later she went so far as to repair her hymen just to earn my forgiveness. One at 4 in the morning, I sat on the sofa, staring fixedly at the door. Elizabeth still hadn't returned, and the message I sent an hour ago remained unanswered. Tomorrow is our wedding day, and as early as 6 o'clock this morning, she texted me, saying she'd be going out with friends tonight. It's perfectly normal to have a gathering with friends before the wedding, but to ensure everything goes smoothly tomorrow, I still reminded her to drink less and come home early. All I got was Elizabeth's usual, somewhat indifferent reply. But I've long grown accustomed to this. I've been with Elizabeth for 3 years, and throughout this time her attitude towards me has always hovered between warmth and indifference, flawless enough to find no fault, yet impossible to truly believe she loves me. Elizabeth's parents told me she was simply born with this temperament. Half convinced, I felt as though I was deceiving myself. Taking a deep breath, I was just about to get up to pour myself a glass of water when my phone notification chimed. I had thought it was Elizabeth who replied to my message. But when I picked up my phone, I realized it was her alternate Weibo account that had been updated. I had stumbled upon this account by accident. Elizabeth would occasionally post complaints about work and her bosses there, sometimes updating about her emotional state. I think this is a good way to understand her far better than her staying silent while I make wild guesses. But this time, Elizabeth's Weibo post was completely different from her usual ones. It was a dimly lit photo, yet the crimson bloodstains on the white bedsheet stood out glaringly. I realized almost instantly what it was, and my hand holding the phone trembled uncontrollably. Heavy breathing echoed through the empty living room as I read Elizabeth's post, feeling like I might suffocate at any moment. It was as if invisible hands were strangling me. I've always saved my most precious things for you, even if I don't belong to you. In this lifetime, my heart will always be with you. My phone clattered to the floor. I couldn't believe that the woman I had been in love with for 3 years had always harbored another man in her heart from the very beginning. Although Elizabeth and I had been together for 3 years, we never had any intimate contact. Elizabeth told me that what she truly revered was platonic love. She hoped we came together because of compatible souls, not because of physical collision. Because I loved her, I respected her wishes and never tried to change her. I even convinced my parents to accept us adopting a child after marriage. But now Elizabeth's actions feel like a brutal slap across my face. My body trembled as I clenched my fists, tightly images of my time, with Elizabeth flashing relentlessly through my mind. 3 years ago, I met her through work. Her efficiency, decisiveness, and rationality at work quickly caught my attention. I added her contact information and tentatively started inviting her out for meals. To my delight, Elizabeth didn't reject my advances. Being together felt like the most natural thing in the world. Though our love lacked those grand dramatic stories, I still cherished our simple, everyday life. Since Elizabeth disliked the smell of cooking oil, I took on all the household cooking duties. She loved flowers, so I'd bring her roses on my way home from work. Our vases were never empty. She loved taking photos, so I meticulously studied camera angles and photography equipment, transforming from someone who couldn't even take decent landscape shots into a semi-professional photographer. She loved traveling, so I cut back on my own expenses to save money, taking her on trips every 2 months to experience different scenery. Over 3 years, I honestly don't believe I made any major mistakes. Yet Elizabeth gave me such an extraordinary gift the day before our wedding. I sat on the sofa all night without sleep, my mind constantly wondering why Elizabeth would do this to me. It wasn't until 6 in the morning that the sound of the door opening finally came. What are you doing sitting here so early in the morning trying to scare someone? Elizabeth's face showed not a trace of guilt, and her tone even carried a hint of impatience. I scrutinized that all too familiar face, carefully searching for even the slightest hint of guilt in her expression. Yet she played her part so well I couldn't detect a single flaw in her performance. Elizabeth had returned barefaced, still wearing yesterday's clothes, but carrying the scent of shower gel that didn't belong to our home. She carried an unusually large bag on her back, its contents completely unknown to me. Where did you go yesterday? You didn't reply to my messages. Elizabeth touched the tip of her nose at my words, averting her gaze. It ended too late, so I just slept at a friend's place. I smiled bitterly in my heart. At least when she lied to my face, there was still a fleeting moment of hesitation. Then you go take a shower first. I'll put your bag away for you. I stepped forward about to take the bag from her hand, as I always had before. But Elizabeth reacted extremely strongly, clutching her bag tightly to her chest, her voice rising sharply. No need, I'll do it myself. She moved quickly, but I still caught a glimpse of that white corner peeking out from her bag. My body froze instantly as an abstract yet bold thought flashed through my mind. Could she have actually brought that bedsheet back with her? After carefully putting away her bag, Elizabeth headed straight into the bathroom. I walked step by step toward that bag, as if heading toward some nameless, boundless hell. My trembling fingers unzipped the handbag, and what met my eyes made my breathing grow alarmingly rapid. She had actually truly cut out that bloodstained bedsheet and brought it back with her. I stared disbelievingly toward the bathroom, where the person inside remained oblivious, still humming a tune in triumph at having cheated successfully the day before her wedding. Elizabeth's phone was lying on the table. I knew her password, but out of trust one had never gone through her phone in 3 years. Would I have been kept in the dark like a fool for 3 long years if I'd checked earlier? The pinned contact on Elizabeth's WeChat was a name I didn't recognize: Anthony. The most recent chat was with her friend. It was a conversation that had continued from last night after she left home until this morning. The further I scrolled up, the more I felt the warmth draining from my body. Elizabeth had been secretly in love with Anthony for 7 whole years. From high school to college, she never forgot him. One was the top student who could do nothing but study, the other was the dazzling school heartthrob. Elizabeth didn't even have the courage to voice her feelings. It wasn't until graduation in their senior year that she realized if she didn't speak now, she might never get another chance. So she went all in. As expected, Anthony rejected her, but the reason for his refusal was utterly ridiculous. He said Elizabeth was too old-fashioned, the kind of woman who would save her first time until after marriage. He didn't like such a conventional woman. This rejection dealt a heavy blow to Elizabeth. So after entering society, she gradually began to change herself, becoming generous and confident. As for being with me, it was simply because Elizabeth came from the countryside, while both my parents were leaders in state-owned enterprises. It was a practical choice. She even told her friends that if I hadn't reminded her of her own timid past self, she wouldn't have agreed to be with me. At 8 o'clock last night, Elizabeth sent her friend a photo of herself wearing sexy lace lingerie, sitting on a hotel bed. This is the boldest thing I've ever done, but the most precious thing. I still want to save it for him. As I put down my phone, Elizabeth happened to step out of the bathroom. She looked at me with confusion and asked, "What's wrong with you today? You're acting so strange." My gaze fell on the fading love bite on her neck, and I couldn't help but force a bitter smile. What am I then, just a pawn in their love game? 3. I didn't say another word all the way to the wedding venue. Looking at Elizabeth standing before me in her wedding dress, I felt not the slightest bit moved. I still remember when we first picked out the wedding dress. She hadn't even put on makeup that day. Yet the moment she appeared before me, I felt my heart would burst from my chest. Only now do I understand that love can truly die in an instant. She walked toward me step by step in her wedding dress until she finally stood by my side. The moment Elizabeth took my arm, all I could see in my mind were images of her entwined with another man in bed. At that moment, I knew I couldn't continue living in such a muddled way. I couldn't bring myself to walk in a marriage pretending nothing had happened. I stopped in my tracks. Elizabeth turned her head in confusion while murmurs began rising from the guests below. I turned and saw my well-dressed parents watching me with worried eyes. Truth be told, Eddie never really liked Elizabeth to begin with. It certainly wasn't because of her background, but rather because I felt I had given too much in this relationship. I used the phrase willingly and gladly to erase all my compromises over those 3 years. Yet I failed to realize if you truly love someone, how could you bear to make them compromise too much? I withdrew my arm. Under Elizabeth's shocked gaze, I walked alone toward the officiant and took the microphone from his hand. Taking a deep breath, the next moment, my voice rang out clearly across the venue. "Everyone, I'm very happy you could come to my wedding. But it's also a great regret because this wedding cannot proceed any further." The murmurs from below grew louder. Elizabeth's eyes widened, and disregarding the fact that she was still in her wedding dress, she strode toward me. "Victor, have you lost your mind? What nonsense are you spouting?" Elizabeth grabbed my wrist, trying desperately to stop me. But I just shook off her hand and declared firmly, "Because just yesterday, I discovered that the woman I was about to spend my life with still harbors an unforgettable first love. Even worse, she secretly went out to meet him for a date on the eve of our wedding. I think any decent person would find such humiliation unbearable, so this wedding I'm calling it off." Elizabeth's face turned deathly pale the moment I uttered my first words. She was probably wondering how I had come to know about this. But the situation didn't allow her any more time to think. I left Elizabeth behind and walked off the stage alone. The crowd at the scene was in complete chaos. I saw Elizabeth's parents trying to confront me, but my own parents stopped them. On the way to the venue, I had been struggling with whether to play dumb and pretend nothing had happened. After all, the wedding was already prepared and all the guests had arrived. If problems arose, now the embarrassment wouldn't fall on Elizabeth alone. But the moment I saw Elizabeth, the first understood. I could never let this go. I left the venue and drove back home. This house was my parents' pre-wedding gift to me. Now that I've decided to end this relationship, Elizabeth certainly has no reason to stay any longer. I had already packed all her belongings before she arrived. Naturally, I didn't forget that piece of bedsheet she brought back from the hotel last night. I even placed it right on top of the suitcase. After I had finished tidying up, Elizabeth's accusatory voice rang out in the living room. Victor, what the hell do you mean by this? Do you have any idea how humiliated me and my parents are? Elizabeth stormed in furiously, but I simply picked up her belongings, calmly walked out of the room, and placed them on the floor. What do you mean by that? Elizabeth widened her eyes and stared at me. What you're seeing, Elizabeth, means we're over. Hearing my words, her face instantly flushed crimson with anger. In Elizabeth's mind, I probably had no right whatsoever to initiate a breakup. Before she could speak, I opened the box first. Elizabeth instinctively lowered her head when she saw what lay on top inside the box. Her open mouth couldn't utter a single sound. The flush of anger on her face vanished, instantly replaced by a deathly pallor. I let out a light chuckle and said, do I need to make it any clearer, Elizabeth? Since you've already given her what's most precious, I won't stand in your way. Isn't this what you wanted? Elizabeth slowly raised her head. Her hands clenched in a fist at her sides as she let out a heavy breath. Since you found out, I won't hide it from you anymore. Victor, I'm the one who wronged you in this matter. What you're doing is understandable. Thank you for accompanying me these past 3 years. Elizabeth crouched down to pick up the box, then turned and left without the slightest hesitation. Watching her retreating figure, a wave of bitterness welled up in my heart. Of course, I wanted to end this relationship. There was no trace left of my former affection for Elizabeth. Yet after 3 years of shared emotions and companionship, she discarded it all so effortlessly, and I still felt chilled to the bone. Perhaps from the very beginning, she never truly considered me her boyfriend. Just a foolish roommate who took care of her life without charging rent. That night, I drowned myself in alcohol until thoroughly drunk. When I opened my phone, I saw Elizabeth had just updated her social media. 2 hands intertwined, wearing matching couple rings. 10 years, and after all the twists and turns, it's still us. She's already with Anthony. A mocking smile appeared on my face, yet tears had somehow already filled my eyes. 3 years of my love for her. What did it all mean to Elizabeth in the end? I don't even know when I fell asleep. I was just woken up by the sound of the door opening the next morning. My dad barged in energetically with a big bag of groceries, followed closely by my mom, who couldn't stop complaining. What's that smell in this room? Didn't I tell you to open the windows for ventilation every day? And those empty liquor bottles on the floor, why haven't you cleaned them up? Look at how old you're still acting like a child. They avoided mentioning what happened at yesterday's wedding, criticizing my daily habits, as usual. Meanwhile, my father had already wordlessly taken the groceries into the kitchen. I sat dumbly on the sofa, watching my mother tidy up everywhere. Strangely enough, the pain and discomfort I'd been feeling actually began to ease under the stream of her nagging. My heart felt like it was filled with something burning hot. My dad cooked a whole table full of my favorite dishes, urging me to eat more and saying I'd lost weight recently. I used to hate their nagging the most, but today I stayed silent. Yet just when such a rare, warm moment arrived, someone had to come and ruin it. The door was suddenly banged loudly. I opened the door to find Elizabeth's mother standing there. Victor, how's that job you promised to arrange for Elizabeth's younger brother coming along? Her words left me torn between laughter and exasperation. I agreed before because Elizabeth and I were in a relationship and about to get married. But now that I've broken up with Elizabeth, what does her brother's matter have to do with me? Annie, Elizabeth and I have already broken up. I patiently explained to her, hoping she would understand what I meant. But who would have thought Elizabeth's mother would glare and raise her voice even louder? What's the big deal? You agreed to it before, and now you want to back out at the last minute. Besides, I haven't even settled the score with you for humiliating my daughter like that yesterday. Let me make this clear, you're the one calling off the wedding, so don't even think about getting a single cent of the betrothal gifts back. Elizabeth's mother was the quintessential country woman, her Mandarin thick with a rural accent that made understanding her a real effort for me. To make matters worse, she was shouting at the top of her lungs, and my already throbbing head from last night's hangover was now pounding even harder. That is going a bit too far with your words. My son made it perfectly clear yesterday. It was your daughter who cheated before the wedding. My parents immediately stepped in front of me, shielding me behind them. Unexpectedly, Elizabeth's mother became even more aggressive upon hearing my father's words. She pointed her finger at my father's nose and shouted loudly, "Do you have proof? Do you have any evidence that my daughter cheated?" Spouting nonsense without evidence, and still have the nerve to call yourself an educated person, Pa. My mother immediately retorted, "If you have something to say it properly. Why are you shouting? I'll shout if I want to what it to you. I'll make sure the whole neighborhood knows your family can't keep their word. You've wasted 3 years of my daughter's youth, and now you're turning your back on her. Elizabeth's mother's shameless distortion of the truth left all three of us flushed with anger. My parents have always been soft-spoken people. They'd never encountered someone so brazen before and were completely outmatched in this war of words. In the end, it was a neighbor who couldn't stand watching anymore that called security. Only after they escorted her away did we finally get some peace and quiet. Closing the door, I looked at the leftover food on the table, having completely lost my appetite. I sighed and said guiltily, "It's all my fault, Mom and Dad." My father patted my shoulder comfortingly and said, "This has nothing to do with you. You just put your trust in the wrong person." "Exactly, Victor. Don't blame yourself. You didn't do anything wrong." My mother smiled at me, her eyes kind yet filled with pity. But even so, what happened with Elizabeth still dealt me a heavy psychological blow. To move past the shadows as quickly as possible, I began pouring all my time and energy into work. My supervisor, who had initially worried that my personal emotions might affect my work performance, now regarded me with newfound respect. He even entrusted me with a particularly important collaboration for the company. And he hoped that, after work, I could sit down and have a proper discussion with the person in charge from the other company. I immediately followed my supervisor's instructions and called the person in charge. So we simply arranged to have dinner together. What I never expected was that the other person would turn out to be that Anthony I'd never met before. And to my astonishment, he even brought Elizabeth along with him. "Victor, how can it be you?" Elizabeth's face was a picture of astonishment when she saw me. After some time apart, Elizabeth had changed dramatically. She used to rarely wear bright-colored clothes, partly due to work requirements and partly because of her personality. But now she wore garish makeup with chestnut brown curls cascading down her shoulders and a slightly tight-fitting short dress that made her look like a cheap, poorly made doll. Not only was there no aesthetic appeal whatsoever, it even induced visual fatigue. Meanwhile, Anthony, who was sitting beside her, immediately gave me a thorough once-over with a scrutinizing gaze upon hearing Elizabeth's words. It had to be admitted that Anthony was indeed blessed with handsome features. Even after leaving campus and entering society, his face remained strikingly eye-catching. No wonder Elizabeth couldn't forget him all these years. "So you're Victor about Elizabeth the first. Suppose I should apologize to you." Though Anthony said this, there wasn't the slightest intention to actually apologize in his tone. Not only that, there was even a hint of provocation in his eyes. I sat down across from them with an unchanged expression and said coldly, "An apology isn't necessary. I should actually thank you for helping remove a ticking time bomb from my life. After all, keeping someone with such low moral standards by my side was never a good thing to begin with." "Victor, what do you mean by that?" Elizabeth looked ready to explode upon hearing my words. She leaned forward as if to stand and confront me, but Anthony caught her by the wrist. Miraculously, Elizabeth, who had seemed absolutely furious moments before, actually managed to rein in her temper. She simply sat there with a stony expression, saying nothing more. Anthony looked at me with keen interest and said, "Mr. Chun is quite different from what I imagined. Mr. Anthony, on the other hand, is pretty much as I imagined." I returned the compliment with sarcastic undertones. Emotionally, I wanted to storm off right then and there, but reason told me I couldn't ruin this matter. After all, it concerned the collaboration between two companies. In the end, I could only discuss the partnership with Anthony with a heavy heart. Yet although Anthony was the project lead, he knew shockingly little about its actual content. This makes me very doubtful whether this project can proceed smoothly. During the meal, I also noticed that Anthony knew nothing about Elizabeth's preferences. Because he didn't like winter melon, he didn't order Elizabeth's favorite spare rib soup. And because he liked celery, he kept serving it to Elizabeth. Although Elizabeth didn't like the food, she ate it anyway, because Anthony had served it to her. So she finished every bite without complaint. This was a classic case of the willing victim and the ready culprit. After observing them for a while, I chose to remain silent. The next day, when my boss asked how the partnership discussion went, I hesitated briefly before voicing my concerns to him. That day after work, my boss approached me and admitted that he found my concerns quite valuable, which was why he had turned down this collaboration. I was thrilled that my thoughts had actually been taken seriously by the boss. The displeasure of being forced to have dinner with Elizabeth and the others vanished in that moment. Just when I thought I would never cross paths with Elizabeth again in this lifetime, I never expected to run into her at the mall. Elizabeth was holding a Chanel bag, selecting rings at the jewelry counter. I had come today to retrieve the necklace my mother had left here for repairs. Seeing me, Elizabeth immediately frowned and said, "Not you again, Victor. You were the one who wanted to end things back. Then so could you stop constantly showing up in front of me now?" Elizabeth's sheer confidence made me burst out laughing. Just then the salesperson brought me the repaired necklace. I shook the bag at Elizabeth and said with a laugh, "Sorry to break it to you, but not every man in the world has designs on you. Miss Elizabeth, when you find yourself with some free time, you might want to take a look in the mirror." Someone let out a derisive snort, and Elizabeth's face turned ashen, then flushed with anger. Gnashing her teeth, she spat out, "Victor, I've been meaning to say this in 3 years with you. You've never given me a single decent gift. Unlike Anthony, who buys me both bags and rings. Elizabeth proudly raised her hand, revealing a gold ring on her forefinger. She wanted to shame me this way, but I simply didn't care. I shrugged and said indifferently, "Of course it can't compare. I would never sleep with a woman who is about to get married. By the way, did you get that bedsheet framed? After all, it's a testament to your love. If I were you, I'd bow to that frame every day. Let it bless your love life, so you stop ruining other people's." With just a few words, I laid bare all of Elizabeth's dirty secrets. She stomped her feet in anger, her voice shrill with rage. "Victor, I'm right here. Why are you yelling like you're trying to summon the dead?" I let out a cold laugh and continued, "By the way, since your boyfriend is so wealthy, it's perfect timing. Return the betrothal gifts our family gave you. Surely you're not planning to keep living off my betrothal money when the wedding is off." When discussing marriage plans with Elizabeth, her parents made an outrageous demand straight away, asking for 500,000 yuan. Although my parents had already begun to doubt my relationship with Elizabeth from that moment, they didn't say much because they knew how much I cared for her. While 500,000 yuan wasn't an impossible sum for our family, I simply couldn't accept just handing it over to Elizabeth like this. As I spoke, I opened my Alipay account. The commotion between Elizabeth and me just now had already drawn the attention of many passersby. Elizabeth had always cared about saving face in this situation. Even if she couldn't produce the money, she would never refuse me outright. Sure enough, Elizabeth replied in a disdainful tone, "Such a trivial amount of money, only someone like you would haggle over it. Take it back then. Anthony will definitely give me much more when he marries me." Without hesitation, she scanned my Alipay and transferred the money back to me immediately. Then she strutted away in her high heels with an ostentatious air. I watched Elizabeth's retreating figure lost in thought. I know Elizabeth's salary, it's not considered low income, but it's certainly not high paying either. What is more, I've heard that Elizabeth resigned after getting together with Anthony. And Anthony holds a position in the company similar to mine, earning just over 10,000 a month at most. He still has to buy a car and a house. How could he possibly afford so much, supporting not only himself, but also Elizabeth? Could he be a secret millionaire? But this doubt vanished from my mind in an instant. Now my life follows a simple routine home office and my parents' place. Since I stopped dating, I found myself with much more free time. Still had the energy to take my parents on a trip. Because I became more dedicated to my work, I got promoted not long after. After returning from another trip with my parents, I heard some gossip from my boss. That collaboration we had turned down, Anthony later partnered with another company on it. Everything went smoothly at first, but later, due to issues with the project and Anthony's lack of understanding, he made the wrong decision. As a result, the project is now suffering a total loss. TSK, if I were his boss, I'd definitely fire him. The boss's words turn out to be prophetic, but what Anthony has to face is far more complicated than just losing his job. My parents bought their house when I was in elementary school, and quite some time has passed since then. So we discussed selling the old house and buying a new one. But just as we were visiting a newly opened property development to look at apartments, we heard a commotion not far away. "How dare you using my money to buy a house for your mistress? You've got some nerve." The woman's booming voice could be heard loud and clear even from such a distance. My father and I had intended to leave directly, but my mother insisted on joining the commotion no matter what. Without another word, she dragged us toward the gathering crowd. Thanks to my superior height, I immediately spotted the center of attention. A man and a woman sat on the ground in disarray, the woman's top torn as she used both hands to cover her private parts. The man also shielded his face, clearly unwilling to be recognized. The woman beating them was dressed extravagantly, obviously wealthy at first glance. At that moment, she was filming their faces with her phone. "Come on, everyone, take a look, this shameless pair of adulterers. Back then, I didn't care that you were poor and married you. I even had my dad give you a position in the company, and this is how you repay me. Losing money in the company is one thing, but you even had the nerve to use my money to support your mistress. Say something, Anthony, weren't you so full of yourself? If you can do it, why can't you speak now?" She screamed while tugging at the man's arm. When that face was revealed, I finally dared to confirm the Anthony she mentioned was indeed the Anthony I knew. And the woman on the other side. I turned to look at her just as someone was beating her head repeatedly with a bag, her pitiful wails piercing the air. That face, though heavily made up, was instantly recognizable to me. It was Elizabeth. My mother, who had been exceptionally excited just moments before, let out a soft TSK the moment she saw Elizabeth's face. Bad luck not watching this. She pulled me away as we turned to leave, while behind me, Elizabeth's screams and pleas continued to ring out incessantly. This farce spread to everyone's ears at lightning speed. Even the video shot that day caused quite a stir online. Some store clerks who witnessed my confrontation with Elizabeth at the gold shop, along with relatives and friends who attended my wedding, left comments under the video. They said Elizabeth was originally supposed to marry me, but she cheated the day before the wedding, which is why it didn't happen. This absurd and morally bankrupt drama successfully turned Elizabeth and Anthony into internet celebrities. Anthony was fired by the company. He had originally gotten the job through connections, so his dismissal came as no surprise. As for whether he and Elizabeth broke up, I have no idea. Until that night, I was working overtime at home when I suddenly heard a knock at the door. Opening the door, I found Elizabeth standing there. The bruises on her face hadn't even fully faded yet. The moment I saw Elizabeth, the first instinctively tried to shut the door, but she grabbed my wrist with a death grip. "Victor, don't close the door. Please, I know I was wrong. I was blinded before, but I've changed now, and I'll never do it again." Elizabeth's eyes brimmed with tears, her delicate features radiating pitiable vulnerability. But no matter what, my heart remained utterly unmoved as I silently watched her put on this clumsy performance. Seeing no reaction from me, she bit her lip and continued. "I had my hymen repaired, Victor. Please give me another chance. I truly know I was wrong, Victor." This was the first time Elizabeth had ever been so humble with me. Yet her words left me torn between laughter and tears. "Elizabeth, do you think I broke up with you just because you slept with Anthony? Also because I realized you're nothing like what I thought you were. You changed so easily for someone else, even going against your own nature after being with Anthony. You even abandoned the career you once took such pride in. Elizabeth, what I've always cared about was never that thin membrane, but your morals and principles as a human being." I looked straight into Elizabeth's eyes, yet resolutely pulled my hand free from her grasp. Looking at Elizabeth's face, I now feel neither pity nor anger in my heart. I shut the door, leaving Elizabeth outside. As for when she left, I had no idea either. 9 months later, the affair between Elizabeth and Anthony gradually faded from public attention. Under the promotion of my superior, successfully secured the position of supervisor. The day of my promotion happened to be my birthday, so I specially bought a large cake to take home and celebrate with my parents. While waiting for the server to pack the cake in the shop, the door suddenly opened. A delivery person walked in, and to my surprise, she was visibly pregnant with a large belly. While I was picking up the takeout, her phone kept vibrating incessantly. Her footsteps were hurried, and as she passed by me, she glanced up and met my gaze. That is, when I realized the delivery person was none other than Elizabeth herself. I was somewhat surprised, and the waiter handing me the cake noticed the confusion in my eyes, voluntarily explaining. "That poor woman, still having to work with such a big belly. I heard people say her husband just loafs around at home all day. Not working is one thing, but with that decent-looking face of his, he is always flirting with young girls. Who knows how many times he has cheated on her side. Her family also has a good-for-nothing younger brother, and her parents favor sons over daughters. Her life is pretty much ruined." The waitress shook her head with some emotion as she spoke. My heart was filled with mixed emotions. I had indeed guessed that Elizabeth wouldn't have an easy time after the video leaked, but I never imagined it would turn out like this. It had started raining outside at some point, but fortunately my car was parked right by the entrance. After thanking the shop assistant, I immediately got into the car. Elizabeth was riding her electric scooter not far away, and I wasn't in a hurry to leave, just watching her receding figure. But just as she lowered her head to reply to a message, a dark figure darted out from some corner and suddenly kicked Elizabeth to the ground. "Fuck, I only spent a little of your money, and you fucking want a divorce. If it weren't for you, would I be living like this now? You fucking bitch, I must have been cursed for 8 lifetimes to get tangled up with you. I'll fucking kill you today." The man's voice cut through the sound of the rain, reaching my ears. It was Anthony. Elizabeth seemed accustomed to this. After falling to the ground, she instinctively covered her head, offering no resistance to Anthony's violence. But Anthony's blows grew increasingly violent. It wasn't until bystanders called the police and officers arrived that this farce finally came to an end. Sitting in the car, I recalled how proudly Elizabeth had flaunted herself before me in the jewelry store and could only sigh with melancholy. By year's end, I had fallen in love again. This time the romantic interest was someone my parents introduced to me, said to have returned from studying abroad. I initially intended just to meet as friends, but unexpectedly discovered during our conversations how remarkably compatible we were. We even shared the same peculiar dislike for anything green. Elizabeth's parents told me she was simply born with this temperament. However, not long after the divorce, Elizabeth was taken back to her hometown by her parents. It seems she was arranged to remarry a man only 40 years old. As for Anthony, he still lived in the city. Relying on his fading looks from lacking long-term patronage, he continued to mingle among women. Later, it seemed he contracted some illness and died alone in a rented room, but the exact circumstances I do not know. Just looking at the woman in the wedding dress before me, I suddenly felt all those past events grow strangely distant, as if they belonged to another lifetime. I smiled and walked toward her, taking her hand in mine. This wedding was as grand as I had imagined. And most importantly, we were in love. The end.